And of course, none of us sees the world the way that it really is. We see the world the way that we are. That's why we see the rose bush as a memory. That's why we see people as first impressions. Because we're seeing the world the way that we are, the way that we perceived it. And the way that we perceive the world largely is based off of the things that are important and valuable to us. You might notice there's somebody in your group who's someplace else. Like they're here, but they're really gone. You know, they're always around you, but they're kind of alone. But you'd never notice it if you weren't looking for it. Why? Because they're a rose bush. And the last time you really talked to them, you're on the same page. And that's how you remember them. Talk to your people, interact with them, update your memories of the rose bushes. And I promise you, man, there's some really beautiful things out there. And some of the directions that some of you guys are going in and some of your friends are going in, man, it's gonna be pretty dope. All right, you ever talk to, I don't know what you'd say. You ever go to the doctor before maybe? That might be an experience. And you're telling them that you have some kind of a pain or some kind of an illness or whatever. And it's almost like they're completely disregarding what you're saying because they feel like, oh, I've seen it 1,000 times before. I've seen it a million, I know exactly what it is. And you're telling them like, I have a pain, like whatever, like inside the elbow or whatever. And they're like, okay, so it's more like over here. No, it's inside the elbow. Okay, what you have is, and they completely ignore what you just said to them. That can be the case also with a therapist. I mean, we think about certain careers, like imagine being a doctor and you go to school for all of these years, you get hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. I mean, it's a tremendous amount of work to become a doctor. And you think about what most of your day is when you're like a general practitioner. Someone comes in your office and they complain about having, I don't know, sniffles or whatever, and you're like, okay, you have a cold, take some vitamin C, drink some water, get rest. And then you go in the next room and that person's sniffling. Okay, if you have a cold, go take some vitamin C, get some rest, drink some water. And you do that so many times in a day that when something severe does come along, you really can miss it. Have you ever heard that expression before, that to a hammer, everything looks like a nail? And if you're a hammer and you ask, how do you fix this table? Oh, you just smash it. Why? Because the hammer, that's all it sees, is what it can be, is its only purpose, which is to smash things. Well, what if the situation doesn't require smashing something? It doesn't matter, you do it anyway, because that's the only thing that you have available to you. Or at least it's the only thing that you have within your experience, because you see so many things that we force it almost to fit our worldview. I think I've mentioned before that, and we'll talk more about it in the fourth quarter, but the way that your memory works, when you perceive the world around you, you don't perceive everything in real time. So for example, if there's a flower bush outside your house, say it's a rose bush, when you walk past the rose bush and you look at it, your memory is being updated. Tomorrow, when you walk past that rose bush and you give it a glance and you keep walking, your brain does not update the image of the rose bush. It sees the rose bush that you saw yesterday. This makes sense. And it's hard for us to get our heads around, but you don't actually see things as they actually are. You see things as they were the last time that you actually examined them. And so you walk past the same rose bush every day, never stands out to you. And then one day when you stop, you might look at it and go, oh my goodness, there's more roses or something. Now that's your memory of the rose bush. And every time you walk past it from now on, that's what you're going to see. Now there might be a little thing over there that catches your attention because we're really good at seeing things in our peripheral. So in other words, when you're looking straight on something, you have pretty good eyesight. Human eyesight is really good out here. You ever see? Try this at some point. Pick an object, like in the room, like a podium, or whatever, and then look straight, and then start turning, and never don't keep looking back, but just keep your eyes straight, and then stop when you no longer see the object. Like right now, as I'm staring straight, I can still see the podium because our peripheral works really, really well. And it also works really, really well to pick up movement. You follow? So if something jumps at you from a bush over here, you're really good at seeing it, even though you're looking this way. Now, the point is that when you're walking around and if you see like something like a bee flying around in the rose bush or whatever, and then you turn, you just because it catches your attention because it's in the peripheral, now you've updated your view of the rose bush. You follow so far? Okay. Now, it's not just rose bushes. It works psychologically as well. It works for people. People are always the same. Nobody changes. Everyone's always exactly the same as you last remembered them until you interact with them, and then something about their behavior changes. And that's why it is that if a person can do something, or you can learn something about a person, that completely changes how you feel about them, what you think about them. Because the same way as when you look at the rose bush, your memory gets updated. When you interact with a person, you think and you interact with them and talk to them, whatever. Your thoughts about them are now updated. This makes sense. And so the point of it is that if you're a therapist and you've interacted with 10,000 patients, and all 10,000 patients seem to have the same thing going on over and over and over and over and over again, you can feel like a hammer, and every single patient's a nail. Meaning that you think that, yes, I know what's going to happen. It's always the same thing. It's always the same thing. What happens when a screw comes along? You don't even notice it. You just smack it down because that's the only tool that you have available to you. If you're a doctor, every single patient who comes in can look like they have a cold or a flu. And then once in a while, after they come in like 4 or 5 times, you finally say, all right, I'm going to send you to a specialist. And then they get checked out, and it turns out they have something else going on. Oh, didn't even notice it. Because you see the same thing over and over and over again. You start to think that that's the way the world really looks. Hi. I don't have time right now. So come back later? Oh yeah, appreciate it. Thank you. So you start to think that everything is always the same case over and over and over again. This is a very long way of explaining it with regards to like a therapist. If they see the same patients coming through, what's wrong? Depression. Okay, so you're depressed because you lack meaning. Or because you've had some kind of a major life event that's changed you and now you're uncertain about the future. No, I've had this since I was a little kid. Okay, so what about your childhood made you uncertain about the future? Nothing. Well, it had to have been something, because otherwise you wouldn't feel depressed. In other words, you force all these views into, it could be something completely unrelated to that. But that only happens if you're listening. But also that requires you to speak. So you have to be able to articulate what it is that you're feeling. I don't think I did it this year, but a lot of times in the first week of school, I ask my students, why are we here? Not existentially, but why are we here in this class? What are we supposed to be doing? Get a credit so I can graduate. Fair enough. But since you're here anyway, what else can you be getting out of this? Why do we bother to require people to do this language arts thing? And a big part of it is, if this was the only reason, it would be a good enough reason. Listening and speaking. Being able to speak, in other words, being able to clearly explain who you are, what you're thinking, what you're feeling. And not just being able to tell a person, here's what I'm thinking, here's what I'm feeling, but also to be able to hear another person so that you're not going to be a hammer to the nail. So that when people are speaking, you can understand every single individual has their own human experiences, and it shaped who they are, it shaped how they see things, and the way that they see things might not be, how would you say it? You might think it's completely crazy. And to you, it would be crazy because it's outside of your reality, outside of your realm of experience. Now there is a reality, of course. There's one objective reality. There is such a thing as truth. There is such a thing as reality. There's no like my truth and your truth, or my reality and your reality. There is a truth and there's a reality. But there are differences in how we perceive it and how we interact with it. Because we see the world differently, different things will jump out at us. To the therapist who always encounters people who are depressed because they lack meaning or purpose, or because they have encountered some sort of a dramatic life change, they will always see a depressed person as suffering from one of those things. That's their worldview. And it almost makes sense, because if that's what it's been 10,000 times, then of course that's where they're always going to lean to. The problem though is that maybe it wasn't that 10,000 times. Maybe it was that only 2,000 times, but the other 8,000 times you forced it into that mold because that's all you could understand, because you weren't really listening. You were focused on seeing the world the way that you see it. And of course, none of us sees the world the way that it really is. We see the world the way that we are. That's why we see the rose bush as a memory. That's why we see people as first impressions. Because we're seeing the world the way that we are, the way that we perceived it. And the way that we perceive the world largely is based off of the things that are important and valuable to us. Like, for example, if I ask you that question that I've asked a million times already, who are you? And however you begin to answer that question tells me what's important to you. Well, I'm a man who lives in National City who, now I know what's important to you right off the bat. What's important to you is your sex and where you live, where you're from, so where your roots are, where you're connected to right now. And then however you start to explain yourself after that tells me what's important to you. The way that you see the world is based off of what you think is important about it. Do you see the world in terms of danger everywhere? Then you're probably focused on survival, everyday survival. Do you see the world in terms of opportunities? Not dangers, but opportunities. Then you're a person who's future-minded. And you have a choice. You can't, it's like if someone comes to that door and throws the door open and jumps in and you're like, ah, and yells at us. You maybe can't control how you react to it. In other words, it might startle you, not scare you, but startle you. But what you can do is you can control how you respond after that. You might not be able to control immediately the things that you perceive in the world. In the same way, you might be startled by the fact that everybody seems the same or that the rose bush is the same. But what you can do is step back once you've been startled and start to respond to the world and start to choose what you focus on. Wow, there's a danger there that jumped out at you, that startled you. But you know what? In every danger, there's an opportunity to improve myself, an opportunity to a business opportunity, an opportunity to help my friends or my family. I wonder how many of you will see the world in a way that you think, wow, I've experienced this one thing, I can really help my family with this. It's one of the ways I know that I'm a teacher, because I interact with things and I think, I want to teach this to my students. I want to show my students this. And right now, I mean, whenever you see me over there, it's like staring at the computer intently, that's what's going on. For every one article that you guys get, I'm not exaggerating, I probably put together another 30 that you never, 30 or 40 that you never see. Because I think, oh, I want to talk about this right now. Even the fact that, for example, Carl Jung, he talks about dream states and being able to communicate in dream states. I'll say something about that after we're done with this. I just read an article yesterday and I was all excited about, ooh. I put something together for it, but you guys will never see it, because I'm going to tell you the essence of it. Researchers recently proved that people can communicate in dreams. Neat, right? That will make more sense in the fourth quarter. But that took up a good hour of my time yesterday, putting together like an article and questions and all this stuff for an article that's only like a page and a half, like a front and half of another page. You know? But that tells me something about it. That's how I see the world. I see the world as an opportunity of, this would make so much more sense. The world would make so much more sense if we had all of this information. And I wish I could just cut open my head and just go and dump it onto you. Not because I want you to be a certain way, but because I want you to see things. You know? And so, do you think I feel lonely like that? I walk in the room, I'm the only one. Guys, listen to this. And you're like staring at a TikTok video with cats. He's got a witch's hat. Like, come on, you can communicate in dreams. Who? Come on. But how you can choose how you see it. But I can also see it as I understand it, because cats with hats are funny, or whatever else you're looking at on the screen has to be interesting. I know it because I opened up Instagram and I have like those recommended videos that have nothing to do with my actual interests but it still stops you and you're like, huh. Screw it. And then an hour later, you're looking up and like you're the only one in the classroom. Bell rang, lights are out. Everyone's at lunch or something. It's the same with values. It's the same with any of these things which you hold to be important to you. What's important to you and why? And if you're the only one who values certain things, and some of you, I imagine if you're anything like every other generation of students that I've had come through here, some of you are experiencing this right now, where you have friends who are kind of like hanging on to the last few days here of high school, last few months of it, and you're starting to like see things differently, and you're starting to think about the future. And then you've probably got people in your friend circle who have been thinking about the future since they were 3, and they're already like way gone someplace else. And you got some people who are holding on to this high school thing or this national city thing. And you might be somewhere in between, but you're starting to realize that you and your friends aren't quite connected in the way that you had been by geography and by being forced together to be in classes. Because the things that are interesting to you, and as you start to develop more and more interests, might be different from the things that they're focused on. And if you have no idea what I'm talking about, that means that you're probably part of the group that is seeing things similarly. And that means if you look around, and you listen, you might notice, bless you, you might notice there's somebody in your group who's someplace else. Like they're here, but they're really gone. You know? They're always around you, but they're kind of alone. But you'd never notice it if you weren't looking for it. Why? Because they're a rose bush. And the last time you really talked to them, you're on the same page. And that's how you remember them. So talk to your people, interact with them, update your memories of the rose bushes. So I promise you, man, there's some really beautiful things out there. And some of the directions that some of you guys are going in and some of your friends are going in, man, it's gonna be pretty dope, I think. Questions, comments, concerns, complaints, criticisms, critiques? Yeah. Happy Tuesday. Yeah.